We're going live. And hello, everyone. It says we're live. Welcome to another episode of Grad Chat from PhD Balance, where we talk about topics of grad school beyond academic research and that may be more difficult to talk about in our day to day. I'm your host, Fay Lin, and I'm a PhD candidate in biochemistry at UCLA. If you like what you see here, check out the PhD Balance YouTube channel for more grad chats, and don't forget to subscribe for notifications about when we go live. And our topic today is bipolar II in grad school, and I'm excited to welcome our guest, Kiara Sofia Vega Bellido. She is currently a neuro PhD student at Baylor College of Medicine in Houston, Texas. Her research involves studying how experiences are encoded into memory, and she's here with us to talk about her experiences with bipolar II in grad school. So welcome, Kiara. How are you doing today?
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I am so excited that we're finally doing this. It's such a pleasure to contribute a little bit to this amazing initiative. Um, I'm doing well, actually. I'm having a great day today. There is this scale that we use to in bipolar disorder patients to rate like where are you in the mood scale. So like from the range from 1 to 4, it's when you're in a low like in the depressive state. Then from 5 to 7, it's stable, and 7 and up is either hypomanic or manic. And I am a happy 7, which is very stable, and I feel good and confident and good energy. And yes, so I'm glad. I'm glad that I'm ready to take on this. Uh, yeah,
Awesome.
Brad.
Yeah, I'm really excited to share with you. Thanks for sharing with us this type of scale thing to
Yeah.
track mood, because I think a great part of talking about, if it is, bipolar 2 that we're talking about today, is we talked about this before the chat, but improving mental health literacy about what that really means and maybe some of the tools that people use when they're going through these experiences, and kind of highlighting like what exactly that journey is like. And I think one of the first questions that is nice to start out with is, can you tell us a bit more about bipolar 2 and your journey to get diagnosed? I think you specifically mentioned in your intro that you first got diagnosed with major depressive disorder in 2014, but then didn't get your bipolar 2 diagnosis until 2019.
Mm,
So, do you want to talk a bit more about what that
yes.
journey was like?
I would love to talk to you all about that. Okay, first off, a little background on bipolar disorder. It's classified into actually 3 different diagnoses. There's bipolar disorder type 1, which is characterized by uh, alternating episodes of mania or manic episodes, which is periods of high energy, usually insomnia, a lot of rapid thinking, impulsivity, risky behavior, delusional thinking, and stuff like that. Uh, and also low grade depression. And it alternates usually for you to be diagnosed with BPD type 1, you have to have had at least one manic episode and also um, have it last more than 1 or 2 days. For my diagnosis, I was experiencing the depressive episodes that lasted more than 2 days, and then hypomanic episodes, which are low grade mania. It just means that I wouldn't sleep suddenly. I would be having a lot of ideas, very creative, very impulsive also. Um, and at times I would recognize delusional thinking, but it never to the point where I couldn't control myself. So that is one of the distinctions between BPD1 and BPD2. Also, another distinction is rapid cycling. So usually it's really important for people who suffer from mood disorders to track their moods regularly. And this means like throughout the day, as well as day by day, week by week, month by month, because that's the only way that you're actually gonna identify your patterns. Because when you're in a depressive episode, or when you're in a hypomanic or a manic episode, your memory blurs and you don't keep track of it. And that is one of the practices that actually helps a lot, is just tracking your mood daily so that you have an idea of how it is that you're cycling through these mood patterns. And rapid cycling is usually seen more in bipolar disorder type 2. And what this means is that you wake up and you're feeling low, you're feeling a 2. Like you don't want to do anything, very feelings of self-worth are like very low, low energy, fatigue, everything, fog, brain fog. And then by maybe 1 p.m., you start feeling optimistic again, and you feel like you can do anything, and you feel suddenly very creative and like you want to be running around and doing a bunch of stuff. And you go through these like through a day, and honestly, it's super unstable. The experience is not, I don't recommend it. Even though sometimes like when you're in a hypomanic episode, it's great because you get things done. And that's usually why people who are actually are actually patients of bipolar disorder type 2 are initially diagnosed with major depressive episode, that because they're only dysfunctional during their depressive episodes. When they're hypomanic, they don't show symptoms that make them dysfunctional or that interfere with their life and work. But when they do get these very severe depressive symptoms, this is when they go seek help. And that's why usually they're initially diagnosed with major depressive episode. And that's what happened to me, because I only went to seek help when I got my first severe depressive episode. Um, the other the other type of diagnosis for bipolar disorder is cyclothymia. Cyclothymia is kind of a mix of BPD, and it's usually accompanied by or triggered actually by substance use disorder, which creates like chemical imbalances in your brain that might already trigger predisposition towards these mood swings. So it's depending on your history of like drug use and also genetic history. Oh my God, wait. I'm sorry. Sorry, something happened. So depending on your history and your symptoms, you're either categorized by, into either one. And that's why it took about 5 years for me to get this new diagnosis that I had to deal with. And it was a shock at first because I had been already used to thinking about myself as a depressive. I don't know. It does. One says yes, your disorder doesn't define you, but you do have to think in terms of your disorder, because every day you wake up with an untreated condition that you need to treat if you want to be functional, and especially in these disorders where suicidal ideation and also self-harm and risky behavior is very common. You need to be very aware of how this manifests in you. So anyway, I got my diagnosis. So I came into grad school for my PhD with that diagnosis after taking a gap year, because after I graduated from my undergraduate, I instead of celebrating the day of my graduation, I had a nervous breakdown. And my mother didn't understand. She was like, "But why are you so sad? You have every reason to celebrate." But by that time, I had been like in an abusive emotional and physical relationship that had also been compounded by excessive drinking. So I had like I had aligned every single circumstance to kind of precipitate a severe depressive episode. And so I took a gap year and I started my my relationship with therapy. I will call myself a therapy veteran because I've been through all types of therapy. And I was partially hospitalized and received medication for it for the first time, and also group therapy and occupational therapy, psychiatric therapy, and psychological therapy. And these are all meant to kind of treat different aspects of uh, mental illness. Clearly, psychiatric for medication, it's a lot of trial and error, which makes it just takes time. You have to be very patient. Group therapy is usually very helpful because you get perspective from other people who are suffering from different conditions than you are. And for me, that was one of the things that really helped a lot. But once I got into grad school, I thought I had it under control, and I did. First 2 years were like a dream because I wanted to do a PhD in neuroscience since I was in 11th grade. And I felt like I had already understood my condition enough that my lifestyle kind of helped me cope with it. And my lifestyle include a healthy diet, exercise, seeing a psychiatrist. So I was taking antidepressants and also seeing a psychologist. And the something I want to make a point out of is that psychiatrists and psychologists offer different types of mental health care support. So psychiatrists are not really there to talk you through or process your problems by talking. They're there to assess your symptoms and then try to determine what prescriptions or which medication might be best suited for you to begin treating your disorder or treating the symptoms of your disorder. Hopefully, with like you getting into you having giving you a buffer so that you can get into a more stable headspace. However, psychologists, they give you more of kind of insight, and also talk to you about cognitive behavioral therapy tools that you can use to ease your anxiety, and also have much more experience working with disorders. So with talking to people with disorders, so they're able to kind of give you a little bit more insight when you talk to them about your experience and help you process through like struggles that you've been having or incidents that have exacerbated your symptoms. So I suggest, if you're somebody who is struggling with mental health, to see a psychologist and a psychiatrist, because both will benefit your treatment plan depending on the severity of your illness. Anyway, so right, the reason that I ended up being diagnosed with bipolar disorder in grad school in my third year was because I started spiraling. I started spiraling because I have always had a struggle with finding meaning in life and meaning in life. And I was in that particular moment not feeling fulfilled with my work, not finding pleasure in anything. And that was compounded by a return to excessive drinking. And something that people don't really talk about is that mental mood disorders or psychiatric disorders like these, like depression, anxiety, general anxiety disorder, or bipolar disorder, borderline disorder, it's usually comorbid with substance use disorder. And if, by the way, if you don't talk about the fact that you're drinking probably more than you should, and you're just talking about your mental or your mood disorder symptoms, you're not giving enough information for an effective treatment plan. And this is something that people struggle a lot with, like being honest with, because usually they think it's socially acceptable to drink as much as you, I don't know, like every day, maybe after work or not. And also you have self-stigma. You don't want to be seen as an addict, right? It's really hard to accept that you have a problem that might be actually making your condition worse. But that's what happened to me. And I recognized that. So I took a leave of absence to really work on on eliminating substances from my life so that I could focus on what exactly was going on with my mental health. Because at that time, not only was I going through severe depressive episodes, I was also rapid cycling and feeling very unstable. It was very hard for me to feel stable for more than like 4 hours at a time. And it's very difficult to function. There's just no way. It's very difficult to function. Luckily, I have a super understanding PI. So the process was relatively painless. With all the shame and humility in the world, I talked to my dean, I talked to my PI. Hello, I'm going through this. I didn't give them details that I wasn't super comfortable with, just told them that I was experiencing exacerbated struggles with my mood disorder. And we decided that I should take some time to just focus on working on that. So I started doing that. I went to intensive outpatient therapy, which is just 3 hours of therapy 4 times a day, where you get to process your feelings. And it's based on abstinence of substances. So that was a goal. I had a lot of trouble staying sober because, first of all, I like drinking. Drugs are fun, and it's really also I had developed a dependence, and it's really hard to like drop that off, even if you're receiving support, especially when the support that they're offering is based on programs like 12 Steps, which is a faith-based program. And I've never been religious, so it was very hard for me to relate a lot to the a lot to their dogma. It felt a lot like going to a cult, and that really turned me off. So I had relapses, never as severe as before. I ended up being in an inpatient facility for a month, and then I stayed sober for a couple of months. After that, I after that is when we really started treating my bipolar disorder. That included that besides antidepressants, I was prescribed mood stabilizers. And mood stabilizers are tricky. The one that I was taking wasn't compatible with me because it actually caused ocular gyrate crisis, which is this really weird thing that if you exert yourself physically, your eyes will involuntarily get stuck looking up and you can't do anything. So I had to stop taking that. Right now, I'm just taking Prozac and acamprosate, which is a anti-craving medicine. Once I got back to school, I was very optimistic about finishing my PhD and finding a way to get my mood disorder into control. Just knowing that now perhaps I was actually taking into consideration all of my symptoms and I had eliminated substance abuse from the equation. But then the pandemic hit right when I was getting back to work, and that was bad for me. I didn't cope very well with that. One, because I lost the psychiatrist that I was seeing. I could no longer see her. Telemedicine is just not the same, I think, as in person. I did not get the same benefits. I probably wasn't getting also like the right medication since I wasn't taking mood stabilizers. So the other ways that I found helpful to cope most effectively have been through meditation and exercise. Meditation, particularly because if you develop it as a practice, it not only helps you regulate your mood, it helps your emotional reactivity. So for example, if I feel that I am climbing up to a hypomanic state, I can recognize that and maybe find an outlet for that energy that would be less risky, or reach out to a friend who already knows what I'm going through, and stay with that friend so that I'm sure I don't do anything unsafe. So having a support system is also something that's been key in being able to cope with my mood disorder. But to be honest, um, what really made it difficult for me to cope with it was the fact that I felt unhappy doing what I was doing in academia. So and after my third year, I started realizing that what I was doing in the lab was actually not something I was super duper excited about. And that just made me feel kind of like I made a mistake, right? And that was also just like influenced by the fact that my moods are very inconsistent, and I was having trouble managing them without like the right medication. And also when you're in a low, you kind of miss days where things happen and you just are hollow of any willpower. And it's, unless you've been there, it's really hard to understand. But I do know that every time you go through a depressive episode, it increases your chances of it recurring again. So that's one thing that I really want people to take take away from this, is that if you're going through a severe depressive this episode, you should make sure that you think about it carefully and examine it carefully, so that you find what were your triggers, what types of habits that you slip into when you were depressed, and try to find ways to actively change that so that you don't fall into that depressive trap. But yeah, once again, once you're diagnosed with it, um, it's just something that you have to deal with and accept, and that takes a lot of effort. And also it takes a lot of like learning about your disease, which I recommend too. Also, if you feel like you're having symptoms that you hadn't experienced before that are affecting the way that you interact with people or your work, you should learn as much as possible and reach out as soon as possible as well. Because even if you're aware of what's going on, when you're in those states, you aren't in control. And you're going to need somebody else, like you're going to need people, a support system to be able to get you out of that state and help you kind of get back on track. But yeah, so so far, I mean, you asked my trajectory. Well, I was wrongly diagnosed. My bipolar symptoms were exacerbated by the anxiety and unprecedented pressures I felt in grad school, and also I guess, well, by the return to like drinking a lot and all of that. So that's kind of what um, made us reevaluate what exactly I'm going through, which is it was a little bit discouraging because you trust these people to know more than you, to be able to you know, based on the information that you give them, to be able to give you a diagnosis that is correct. I don't know. I don't blame anybody but myself, I guess, or nobody. It's just shows you that psychiatric healthcare has a long way to go, I think, in terms of like diagnosis, especially when a lot of these mood disorders have overlapping symptoms. And yeah, people are usually not as honest with their healthcare providers as they should be. And yeah, I'm not sure, I rambled a lot, so I wanted to make sure that I touched on all the things that you asked. My trajectory, that's been pretty much it. Now, I exercise regularly, eat regularly. I have a support system. I journal and track my moods. I also talk about my experience to other people. That also I feel is important, because the only way that we're gonna dismantle stigma is by educating other people, and also by these making this knowledge about mental illness, making it human, making it easier for people to empathize, and seeing that even though people are struggling, you can still kind of live a high functioning life. Because with stigma, uh, it's based on ignorance and prejudices that can only be dispelled by educating people and by listening to others who are going through it, or who work with it, so that you can gain perspective and understanding, rather than just judging from stereotyping or not knowing, right? Yeah. uh so I don't know. I got really lucky though with my program, because I've always felt like they got my back. And one of the reasons why I chose that program in particular was because they made it very clear that mental health is a priority for them. So their resources are super accessible, and actually really, really great, and covered by your insurance. So yeah, that's one of the things that I really appreciate about that. I also got super lucky with my PI, that he's really understanding and just wants me to be okay. That's literally his priority. And I know that's not the case for everybody. When you deal with somebody like that, when you can't really talk to your PI about your struggles with mental health, you start making excuses, or you start isolating and you don't reach out, then you need to find, I don't, usually institutions, I think they're getting better at this, but they do have people that you can talk to about these problems, and they can kind of mediate conversations between you and your boss. But again, that depends on your mentor and how understanding the person is of these issues, because I feel like academic culture um doesn't really have a space or the infrastructure for support um, for mental health in grad students. One, because it's not talked about, the stigma still exists, um, and also uh, what I've read is that people just have self stigma. They don't want to reach out because they don't want to be seen as incompetent or as not able to, function, even if they could be, they could be taking care of themselves and taking care of their symptoms, if they just talked about it and found the right treatment available, and be back to themselves. So I feel like that's why there's such a high incidence of exacerbated symptoms, and also onset of disorders that they hadn't experienced before when they're in grad school. There's just not an infrastructure for that type of support in some places, most places.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing that trajectory. I think it really highlights the complexity and how much, even at like, especially for the person experiencing this, that it's a learning curve to figure out what treatment plan works, or like even in the first step of like getting a diagnosis, like a lot of people don't understand how complex that journey can be. And I think a lot of the problem is people who don't go through mental health literacy just simplify things, and that makes it so frustrating, because then you have to go through the steps of educating people on top of managing your own stuff.
Yes.
And let's say we do have a question in the chat that says, like, what is the best way to help if I have a friend or colleague who is struggling with bipolar disorder?
The best way to help? All right. Learn about bipolar. Learn about bipolar disorder. Talk to your friend about their personal experience if they are open to talking about it. Some people find it helpful to talk about it. Other people actually don't find it that helpful. They find it that it gives them anxiety. And this is something that I've been thinking about, because most of the therapy is based on talk, or if exempting a lot of psychiatric therapy is based on talking about your moods and your feelings and your experiences. But I've talked to a lot of people that doesn't work for them, and they're usually self-identified introverts. So I wonder if, like, since we know that medicine in general is going to be personalized, I think you should you should learn about bipolar disorder first of all, and what are the symptoms that your friend might be experiencing, so that you can empathize a little bit better when they talk to you about their moods. Also talk to them, just try to open a conversation with them. If you can communicate with them, they might be able to tell you how they believe that, how best you can help them. For me, it's really, really helpful to have someone to go to when I'm feeling risky, when I'm feeling like way hypomanic, and I need to be somewhere safe, because I know that I can't trust myself. So depending on their diagnosis, learn about it. Just make sure that they know that they have your support, be available for them if they need you. Yeah, usually that's the best thing that you can do, because the other things is really up to them. And yeah, it's a lot. It's one of the hardest things that I've had to do, is actually learning how to live with this condition. And also, while also having had to eliminate the fact that, substance use just makes it worse for me. And a lot of people don't really admit that to themselves, and they believe that they're self-medicating and helping themselves. But you should, I recommend just educating yourself and probably seeking out professional help before you start self-medicating, because it might just make your problem worse. Yeah. But yeah, the best way to help your friend is to learn about it and to talk to them about it. That's what I would say, or at least for me, that's what helps.
Yeah. No, I just want to echo, like, it's absolutely important to educate yourself about these things, because a lot of the burden is placed on the person experiencing it to either describe what they're experiencing and do that education, which is itself so much energy. And I think a lot of people who ask questions about how can I help, I think they don't maybe realize that there are resources, maybe books or articles or whatever it may be, that you can use to do some of that work.
Definitely.
To help.
Just to add, or to maybe surmise my second point, something that I struggle with if I'm just by myself is accountability. So I will share, with people who are really close to me, who know like all I've gone through. Like, for example, my mother. I will tell her, okay, So this is what I want to accomplish this week. Or if I'm having a bad day and I have a Pilates class, but I know that it's important for me to stay active and to do these certain things like every day, I will try to, usually my friend will go with me or like help me be accountable or like check in with me every now and then. That helps. Even if I'm just lying in bed and they're like, hey, are you okay? And I'm like, no, I'm having a bad day. Can I help? Anything? Just showing that you're there. It, it really does help.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. Support people, everyone. Woo.
Yeah. And help them be accountable, because it's really hard when you're relying on somebody who's not reliable, who's working on it.
Right. Yeah. Let's see. We are actually coming up to the end of the grad chat because it's been a great half hour. Kiara, if there's any,
It's a lot.
if if
It's
there's
a lot.
any maybe like sentence or two that you want to sum up your thoughts or anything you haven't shared with the audience today, anything that comes to mind before we log off?
Oh yeah, definitely. So if you guys want to try to do something for your campus or institution and the service of their mental health resources, I suggest getting in touch with Dragonfly Mental Health. They are a fantastic nonprofit that offers resources such as mental health literacy talks, also mentor training for active listening and for dealing with um, students who might be struggling with their mental health, which I think is one of their best resources and completely necessary and should be implemented everywhere. And also, they have this model for a peer support network. And I think that's also something that could be really helpful if you look into what they've already done and maybe start a peer support network in your campus, and that can really help a lot of people and help the community in in general, as well as like look for resources online. PhD Balance, I know, gives a lot of shout outs. Like if you follow them on all their platforms, they're always sharing resources to be more about to live a more balanced life, or to follow other people who have tips and guides to how to deal with mental health in academia. So just find the resources, they're out there, you're not alone. You can also like reach out to me if you want to talk about anything, if you're going through the same thing, if you're wondering if academia is, you know, the the good a right decision for you, then also talk to me about it, because yeah, I've been through that struggle, and you really need to think about it, because you don't really need to do a PhD if it's gonna cost you your mental health. That's also something that people don't talk about, because we're overachievers usually if you want to do a PhD and we commit to that goal. But just, you're not alone. Reach out and educate yourself. That's
I love
what I would
that.
say. Yeah.
Yeah. No, exactly. You listed some great resources. I'm going to give an extra shout out to Dragonfly Mental Health and drop their link in the chat. Check them out. They champion mental health literacy. Also, PhD Balance is absolutely awesome. And there is definitely a great list of additional resources out there that frustratingly might take some work to look for, but they are out there. So I love it.
Yeah.
Reach out for help,
Hmm.
educate yourself. Great messages.
Definitely.
And we are out of time for this grad
Yeah.
chat, but this has been great. Thank you so much, Kara, for being so honest and vulnerable and sharing your story, because I think, again, a great way to challenge stigma is putting these stories out
Yeah.
there. And it's been awesome. So if
I'm s-
you're,
yeah. I'm
yeah,
glad I finally got to talk all the hour, all the half hour, and talk all about, yeah, my experience, and also about mood disorders. There's still a lot we don't know, and it's all about figuring out what's best for you. It's always going to be a unique experience, by the way. Like every STEM PhD experience journey is unique. You need to find out what's best for you.
Definitely. And it helps to share everyone's unique stories and learn from each other.
Yeah,
and,
that's
you
what I
know,
loved it about these grad chats, and they talk about everything. So yeah, love
yeah.
it.
Woo.
Yay!
Well, I will just remind everyone to subscribe to our YouTube channel if you want notifications about our future grad chats. But until then, we will see you next time.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Woo. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.